This happened like 6 times to me where I forgot to click that, so it didn't record anything for class. Now I know that's, but it's like, why do you have to make it just one more step more difficult each time you do some kind of change the program? Now, do all of you feel my pain now? You don't, do it. Wow. After all we've been through. And to think I was going to let you off Flamingo Friday. Not now. What day is it today, people? Flamingo Friday. Yes, I will let you out Flamingo Friday. Because I can't deny Flamingo Friday to you. Got from here, didn't we? Does this look right?
Being made there.
Perfect. So it is Flamingo Friday today. And that's the thing. It's cloudy outside. But Flamingo Friday is like the sun shining on all of us, bringing the warmth of option. All right. Drum roll, please. Oh, no. Yeah. Come on. Give it up. Give it up. Give it up. You guys notice Garfield back there? See Garfield? Have you seen the rat? The rat is majestic today. Oh, by the way, have you noticed the rug? Yeah, it really ties the roof together. Doesn't it? Just ties the whole, it brings everything. Look at this. See? Look at that. I didn't pay extra for that. You just did it. So, we got to Tyler. What do they call the campaign? Image-based campaign of William Henry Harrison?
Log cabin cider.
Yeah, log cabin campaign, but hard cider was the other part of it. So you might see log cabin and hard cider. And he defeated, who was the city president he defeated? Who? Someone said it? Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was the city president. Oh, you said it? I didn't hear it. Sorry. And it proved that image was more important than anything else. Image was everything. So what was the great slogan that Harrison used? Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. And we are plays American system right there. So we got the veto, we got the Texas, is that right? So it's really important that campaign. Oh, they do. So the Whigs, they knew they were kind of in the minority naturally. What was the way they could divide or cleave off Democratic votes? There were 2 things they would do. What was one? They would accuse whom for all the problems in the US? What kind of people? Who? Immigrants. They were natives. Immigrants are causing all your problems. And number 2, what's the other one? If they use nativism, and what's the other thing? Well, religion was part of it. Just cultural issues. Remember culture, they say act like he's a Westerner. Not. They didn't campaign on the American system. So we got right to that. Look, we get this. So we're here. Do we get anything for this? So that's Sam Houston. And Sam Houston is the president of the Republic of Texas. And he is in real trouble. Texas is in real trouble. Mexico has not given up their claim and is threatening to take Texas back. Now, Mexico is in debt, has a lot of problems, but still a lot stronger than Mexico. So their population is really low. No citizens of the United States are going to move into Texas because Mexico might come back and kick them out or even kill them. Because technically, Texas is saying that they're all traitors. No, what happens to traitors? So they have no people, but just as important, no tax base. No one is paying taxes. Texas has debt. They have to fund the government. They have to fund the nation. They need money for a militia to defend the Comanche, slave rebellion, and Mexico. Well, remember bonds. They're in debt. They issue bonds, but to get people to buy the bonds, they have to get really high interest, really high, which means more debt. So Texas is in a debt spiral. There's no way the country can survive at this state. And here's Sam Houston doesn't know what to do about it. He needs annexation now. He doesn't care what happens. He doesn't care what happens in Texas as long as either they're annexed or something happens where Mexico can't come back. He's even willing to talk about getting rid of slavery as long as they're protected from Mexico. But the best case scenario, annexation. So he needs to find a way to push the United States. So here we have this resentful, angry president who needs an issue, and here's Sam Houston desperate. So Sam Houston is thinking, I have got to do something incredibly dramatic. Incredibly dramatic. Well, let's get back to Washington, D.C. Here's Tyler looking for revenge. And he needs an issue. Daniel Webster had just signed the Webster-Ashburton Treaty implying that U.S.-British relations were getting better. But then he left. He needs a new Secretary of State, and he would pick that man right there from Virginia, Abel Upshur. Which, by the way, that's kind of an awesome name, isn't it? Abel Upshur. Upshur was a protege of a man from South Carolina who had spent much of the last 25 years before this trying to find a way to unify the South to protect slavery. He too, like Tyler, had been a Democrat and a Whig, I guess, and a Republican before that. What person am I referring to? A protege of whom? Yes, John C. Calhoun. So, he's going to use, how do we get that? Texas as a wedge issue. An issue to divide both political parties and get his revenge. And Upshur will be his tool to do it. Therefore, unify the South to protect slavery and hurt both the Whigs and the Democrats by taking away Southern Democrats and Southern Whigs and create this pro-South party. And Calhoun has been trying for years. That's what the whole thing about nullification of the tariff. It wasn't the tariff so much as protecting slavery. So Texas will be the issue. So here's Texas right here. Back to Sam Houston. Sam Houston is sitting there watching this, and he decides, I can't wait. We don't have time. Going into the middle of 1843, Sam Houston begins talks. So he talks to Great Britain to become a protectorate, meaning to become essentially part of the British Empire. To become part of the British Empire. Now, the US and Britain have better relations, but there have been years of animosity. And he knew this would freak out the United States. So he's doing a desperate move. A protectorate is not quite being in the empire, but essentially it is. The thing is this, and I didn't type this down, so add this. Britain is now become the leader of the abolitionist or anti-slavery movement. Britain was anti-slavery. They banned the international slave trade in 1807. They just said, we're banning, we're going to stop slaves. The Royal Navy was patrolling the coast of Africa, stopping slaves. And in 1836, they banned slavery in the empire. So Britain was anti-slavery. Now, they still treated the people in the areas that controlled this empire horribly. They just didn't call them slaves, but they're anti-slavery now. So, Houston knows Texas would have to change, aka get rid of slave codes, meaning become a free country. No slavery. Britain is anti-slavery. Now, Sam Houston was a slave. He did have slaves, but he did not care too much. His big issue was keeping Mexico out, and better to be under the shadow of Britain than Mexico. So that's playing with fire. They even talk about a flag. They never actually made it with the description of the Texas flag. These are one of the descriptions. I just thought that was really interesting. Instead of this Lone Star with red, white, blue bars, the Union Jacks. I thought that was kind of cool. And right there, a protectorate. And now think Texas, right there. Remember, US territory then, or this is the border here, a pretty effective wall against the expansion of the United States. He knows he's playing with fire. He sends this message through emissaries to Lord Aberdeen, the foreign minister of Great Britain, and Aberdeen responded to Texas with kind of a weird, lukewarm mate. Aberdeen was taken aback. He knew this would infuriate the United States, so he did one of those where he tried to straddle the fence, like, oh, we understand what you're saying, but we don't really think about it. So this weird kind of swishy baby, non-committal, which of course pleased nobody. Sam Houston knew it would blow the United States up. Because, can anyone guess the reaction of Southern members of Congress? Fury. And they immediately started saying, if Texas comes in to the British Empire, we might have to secede. Because the United States clearly is not looking out for the best interests of its states. And they said, we need diffusion. We have to spread slavery out, not just to defend it, but also what's their greatest fear? The high concentration of slaves might lead to what? Slave rebellion. And look at the wall this would create. Here's Texas now, protected by Britain. And Texas claims all this now under Britain. This is Mexico. This Indian Territory, it's called, under the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And so that's the border of the US. But remember 3630 for the Missouri Compromise. Remember the Missouri Compromise. No slave, or Maine free, Missouri slave, and no slavery north of 3630. So where do they go? As they see, we're going to be isolated right here. And even if they get Oregon, the assumption is by the terrain of Oregon, not good for plantation agriculture. So that will not be slave states. To the south, you are squeezing us and condemning us to slave rebellion. But more than that, they called it a safety valve. Free Texas would be a place for runaway enslaved people to go and be protected by the British Empire. So remember I told you about downriver, the area that's all the new these slave camps were coming, the plantations. Pretty close, isn't it? And then they could run away here and be protected. So then therefore they would not be brought back into enslavement. Just that. And then they said, Britain, who's anti-slavery, could arm those former slaves and be used as a base for raids into the South that start a slave rebellion. Wow. And if we allow Texas to become part of the British Empire, the South would have no choice to secede because that's going to happen. So you notice they went nuclear right away. Like right away, how dare you do this war? And wow. Actually, Houston, I think this is going a little farther than I wanted. Immediately they're talking about this. No way. And Britain is like, oh, we don't want this. This is not going to happen. They just gave kind of this squishy answer. And it turned into talk of civil war like that. Texas. Everybody could talk about Texas. Now we're getting near the end of 1843. And this is going to become a massive issue. Still recording? There's the things up there. You can see something with that. But then a tragedy happened. A parrot exploded, killing a blush. After this parrot exploded, I would need to do something. Have you been around parrots? They explode all the time, spontaneously. So a parrot exploded, and we need a new one. Where did he look? By the way, I'm really fascinated by people like going, of course parrots explode. Parrot. It was a 40-pound parrot exploded. Anyone know what a 40-pound parrot is? A parrot is a rifled cannon. A mouse. Upshur was at an exhibition of a new cannon. They call them parrots. they were more accurate because they had rifle barrels, the cannonball would spin. And it was gonna be 40 pound and put on a ship. It has to be that big because it's too heavy to be on land. And these were the best cannons. Parrots were the best at that time, but it's hard to forge iron to be strong enough to handle the whisk with when the black powder is ignited, the gases can blow out the back. And that's what happened. Instead of going that way, it went backwards and hit the revealing sand, and up your died a parrot exploded. By the way, anybody want to guess they gave this 40 pound parrot the nickname? By the way, 40 pound cannibals like that. They called it the peacemaker. Yep, yep. So, who's going to be the new Secretary of State going into 1844? Steve Calhoun. By the way, you like the picture? You like the picture? Now, I didn't do it last year for various logistical reasons. This year, I think I'm going to do it. So the week before break for Christmas or Festivus, whatever you call it. Those you may know what Festivus is. You haven't seen the documentary? There's a whole documentary about that. Separate one. So, no one's heard of it. There's this documentary series called Seinfeld. From there. But moving on. I might do it if enough people want to do it. A dress up day for us. I narrow down the people you would dress up as, but for my personal amusement. And I mean, for the, it was. Wouldn't that be good? Huh? Who's with me? Now, you have to start working on the neck hair now. But there'll be others. So if we do it, I'll let you know. If enough people are interested in it. So he became the new Secretary of State. And he immediately realizes the advantage of Texas. He had already tried a divisive issue in the Congress called the gag rule, saying they can't debate slavery in Congress. Basically, all Southerners, regardless of party, had to vote for this. And it lasted for nearly a decade. But that was not the big issue he hoped for. He needed something bigger. Texas. So as Secretary of State, he fired off a letter to the British ambassador to the United States, Lord Pakenham. And Lord Pakenham got this letter. He's like, oh my God, because the letter was amazing. Now, his great uncle, or no, just his uncle, was the British general who died leading British troops at the Battle of New Orleans, the last battle of the War of 1812. At the Battle of New Orleans, General Pakenham. So he's from a very famous family. Did I tell you the story of Pakenham? I didn't tell you the story of Pakenham. Want me to tell you the story of Pakenham? General Pakenham, hero of the Napoleonic Wars. It was called the Peninsula Campaign. So he's a very high-profile British general, and his job was going to take New Orleans, and then maybe, who knows, hold it to the treaty. And Andrew Jackson and his forces decisively defeated the British, and Pakenham was mortally wounded. Pakenham died in this battle. So this British hero died, General Pakenham. Now the British just buried their enlisted men wherever. The British buried their enlisted men wherever they fall. So there are graves kept by the Park Service, impeccably kept by the Park Service today, where it says, "Here lies a soldier of the British Empire." Basically, what they did is they just threw him in the swamp for alligators. And then they put up tombstones. But Pakenham was a hero. And they brought him back to Lake Lawrence, where the British ships were, on board a ship to send him back for a state funeral. Actually, his wife was on board the ship. There, because he could bring his wife, it's high rank. So she took the body. And they had to preserve the body for either, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a whole month to get it across the Atlantic. How do you preserve a body, especially in 1815? Okay, salt. They didn't have that. There was a combination of relative shortage of salt. Salt would also just kind of, yeah, I just didn't like the way what it did to the bodies. There might be another way, yeah. alcohol. You're exactly right. On the Royal Navy, every Royal Navy sailor, in fact, this is all the way to World War II, would get 2 grams of rum. Think about maybe like 3/4 of an ounce of some kind of alcohol, raw. It would be watered down rum, so maybe like 20 to 25% alcohol. They would get 2 like mini shots every sailor. So they had rum on board. So there was a barrel of about 1/4 full. So they kind of manipulated Pakenham's body and jammed him in, nailed it down for the drip across. Now, 2 things. First off, 25% alcohol. Would that really preserve? So it's going to be a gray thing when they get back to Southampton. But more than that, it was a tough journey and it took much longer. And they ran out of the rest of the rum halfway across. When they got to Southampton and they pulled out Pakenham's body, took off the lid, it was bone dry and just a gray thing. Meaning that some of the sailors got thirsty and they weren't picky. So that was Pakenham's body, how it got back. He's lying in state at the Tower of London. He's crypt there. He lied in state and they buried him in a crypt with all these other British military heroes at the British Tower of London. And if you go to London, you go to the Tower of London, they have all the just markers where they're at the crypt. And when I was there, your tour guide is a British Sergeant Major in the Army. He is a at least 20, 25-year veteran of the British Army. But they're all dressed like it's 16th century. They're great. It's really cool. But the guy was talking to us, my wife and I are standing there listening to him. And I look over and right eye level, it was happening. So I was standing right next to a little mark and his crypt right there. So a strange kind of coincidence coming back. Let's get back to Pakenham letter. So the Pakenham letter, and you can imagine what it said. It was basically, no, Britain cannot make this a protectorate. This is an American interest. You can't take Texas. And what is the doctrine that was signed in 1823 that said no European intervention in the Western Hemisphere? If you do not know, we had this in class. You must write this down again. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. Some of you, I think that should sound familiar. If not, write it down. You have to know this. We will come back to it. This will be a big deal in the 1890s. So the Monroe Doctrine. But then Calhoun kept going. And the reason he did was he wasn't concerned so much about Texas. He was concerned about the protection of slavery. And he turned the argument for Texas into not just an argument for the spread of slavery, but that slavery was a good thing. That slavery was positive and it benefited civilization of not just those who were the slavers, but the enslaved people are better off with slavery. Why should we stop slavery? Slavery is natural. People have always had slavery, and we should continue to have slavery, and no one should feel bad about having slaves. And he would dub this eventually the positive good theory of slavery. And this will become the ideological argument for the South to defend slavery, to start the Civil War, and then to defend their actions after the war. The positive good theory. We will have to know about the positive good theory. You'll read about it more next week. So basically, he turned it all into an argument about the United States. And you can imagine Pakenham going, oh my God, what have we just gotten into? And he sent it off to Britain. But that's not the key thing. Calhoun also sent a letter to Democratic newspapers. And boom, it's everywhere. Southern Democratic newspapers. And now everyone's talking Texas. And so Calhoun turned the annexation of Texas going into 1844, once again about slavery and potentially civil war. One more thing. It didn't work as well as Tyler had hoped. This did not get his full revenge where he thought, I could be president in my own right. But 1844 is coming up. He knows it's divisive, incredibly divisive, but really divisive because of the election. And now the election Well, what kind of country? What are we going to be? What kind of country? More importantly, what system? Will we be the system of this growing industrialization, capitalism, or the proto-capitalism, slavery, slave plantations of the South? Calhoun is saying we have to have this. This is better for all people. This is natural. This is not. Do you remember the term for when people who were fearful of capitalism and they looked at the kind of jobs they would get? What did they call themselves if they were stuck in that system? Do you remember that? Not factory slaves, close. Somebody whispered it. Wage slaves. You're so close. Wage slaves. And what Calhoun is going to say is wage slavery in a factory is significantly worse than chattel slavery. Which all of us should be going, wow. So, let's get to the key element that led to war, though. South Carolina's there. Georgia's there. New York's there. Illinois is a state. What system will go west? That's the fight. And that's the election. So remember, 1820, we almost had civil war with Missouri Compromise. 1833, almost had civil war with the nullification crisis, and Jackson stood them down. And now it looks like it could potentially happen again right during an election year. What a time, huh? Once again, it's kind of amazing. Survived all this. So, the Democrats, you can imagine, they're kind of in disarray. Martin Van Buren wants to come back again. Let me run again. I should have won. Harrison was a fluke. I'm going to win. Now, Sam, what do we have out there? What's up? Not again. Want to see stuff from other classes. This is not a study hall. I have places to file those away. All right. So, Martin Van Buren. You know what a Trojan horse is? You know the story of the Trojan horse? The siege of Troy, Greeks snuck in after an 11-year siege and captured it. Southern Democrats believe that Martin Van Buren was a Trojan horse against slavery. Even though he said he wasn't against slavery, even though he was Andrew Jackson's vice president, they said he's secretly a Trojan horse. He's secretly against the expansion of slavery. And the term for that by 1844 was, is he free soil? Free soil. Is he free soil? So a free soiler is someone against the expansion of slavery. They're not necessarily opposed to slavery, like slavery in South Carolina, but they're exposed to expanding it. They're against slave power. Was Martin Van Buren? He insisted. And when they had their convention in Philadelphia, and that was the building that they held in the convention hall, he actually won the majority of delegates. But Southerners made sure that the Democratic convention required 2/3. He didn't get 2/3. Basically, so the South would have a veto on any Democrat. And that would go on until 1932. The South could veto any Democrat, even though there were more Northern Democrats than Southern Democrats. So Van Buren didn't get the nomination. They did a few more votes, couldn't get any more. Every vote he got a little bit less. Pretty soon, other names started to call. They started running other people. No one could get 2/3. They soon had over 100 votes. Nobody had, it's called a hung convention. The Democrats were disarray. They needed somebody who could step in, but didn't have a long record, was not controversial. Does anybody know the name from horse race? Horse race was becoming really popular. Of a horse that had long odds, meaning no one expected to win, and came out of nowhere and won. Underdog's good. That's another term, but they have one specifically for horse race. Out of the shadows it comes. It's called a dark horse, and they need a dark horse. So a dark horse so it is kind of an underdog too, but a dark horse is somebody who doesn't have a long reputation, that no one expects to become nominated. And if they're not very well known, that means you can almost, remember how I told you image was so important in 1840? You can create his image. They needed somebody who had maybe a good reputation amongst a few members of Congress and a few Democrats, but not well known. A dark horse. By the way, that's Van Buren. We've had a lot of dark horses in politics. For president, Abraham Lincoln was a dark horse. He didn't have a long reputation, so they could create an image. There'll be other presidents in other presidents we dark horses. Woodrow Wilson, or in my lifetime, 1976, Jimmy Carter was a dark horse. Barack Obama was a dark horse. He'd only been in the Senate for 2 terms. I'm sorry, 2 years. So we had no real history, so they could create him. Donald Trump was a dark horse because he was not involved in politics at all. In fact, he was not even really a member of any political party. And so they could create an image for him. Do you see the advantage of that? If you have, if let's say you've been in politics for a really long time, you have a long history. People know you. So that is the advantage. Who's going to be the dark horse? Well, a protege of Andrew Jackson, a protege of Old Hickory. He was from Tennessee, a fierce senator, a member of Congress and governor, a man that everybody feared if they knew him, but outside of Tennessee, they didn't know him. His name? James Knox. Oh. Young Hickory. He was known as fierce, unsmiling. Okay, no one smiled in pictures back then, but that's his smile. Hey, why didn't anyone smile at these first photographs from the 1840s? Yeah. Yeah. You had to sit for so long because the exposure time could be as long as 10 seconds. So you had to sit there and not move. So everyone's like this. Trying to not move. So they all look like they have some kind of intestinal problem. Right? There's a reason for that. So you can always tell their resting face. His running mate would be a guy named George Dallas. We named after him. Anyone know? Yeah, Phoenix, Arizona. Dallas, Texas, of course. So, and remember Tippy Canoe and Tyler too? He came up with a brilliant slogan. 54, 40, or fight. It sounds tough, it sounds aggressive, and it's manifest destiny. 5440 was the northern latitude of Oregon Territory. And he says, we're gonna fight for it and take it from the British if they don't give it to us. Now, there's now, and I'm opposite again. Oh, the British, because of Houston talking to them. And so it worked. So we're going to expand westward. We're going to get Oregon. We're going to get California. So he didn't have to exaggerate Texas. He could exaggerate Oregon and California, which were not as controversial. And it was very clever. No, Polk did not want war. And the British are like, what the heck is going on here? But it sounded tough. And it put the Whigs in a little bit of a quandary. The people of the United States wanted Oregon. They want to claim it. What does he say? That gets back to slavery then. Well, the Whigs, they nominate Henry Clay. Clay decided it's my turn. I've tried 3 times. I'm going to become president. His running mate would be William Frelinghuysen of New York. I like the flag and the creepy Henry Clay there. And American system. Tariffs, bank, internal improvements. It's time. He runs with that. So unlike Harrison, he's running on issues. But what about Oregon? What about Texas? What about manifest destiny? He is, the term is swishy on both of them. He kind of gives this lukewarm, the Texan, like, we'll annex it if Mexico approves. Well, Mexico's never going to approve. And he kind of back and forth around Oregon. He's trying to straddle the fence, which of course is going to leave an opening to the Democrats and one more party. I mentioned them, I think, yesterday. Oh, by the way, remember I told you about the faces? That's his resting face. So Clay's resting face was this slight grin. kind of. I can't do it because I feel really uncomfortable. Try it. Just try it. Just don't smile. Just go. No other emotion, and then smile. Really hard to do because your eyes start. You can't get the smiling eyes. Once again, yeah, we'll come back to Clay and that face. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. This new campaign based on image, you can dress up like him. Look at that. Look at that Henry Clay outfit. That's a real Clay outfit. Now, for dress up day, many people have dressed up like that. And a couple of them, actually more than one, but these only two that survived. They made little Clay costumes. They made these and wore them for dress up day. Now, this person, that's their Clay. I thought this was hilarious. The pants. Another person took this smock that their dad had used for like painting and staining, so it kind of looks kind of dirty. But pretty good though, isn't it? I believe this is Mr. Carter's piece. He did this one. Maybe it's which Carter's? Mr. Carter, the PE teacher. Okay. So on Mr. Carter, the track coach, it's great piece. Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it? I will let this one go too for us. If we do it, you want to do something? Talk to me the next couple of weeks. All right. I love that. It reminds me of a basketball warm-up too. Reminds me of the University of Indiana. Some of you might know. Okay, so a new party jumped in, the Liberty Party. And the Liberty Party was an abolitionist party. Now, they're not going to be big enough to take an election. Remember, in a winner-take-all system like the U.S., third parties take away votes from the other party or another party. Are they going to take away votes from Whigs or Democrats? The Whigs were really worried it would take away votes from them. They're only the party in New England. They didn't have that many votes, but if in a close election, this could be crucial. I should add, write this down if you don't know the term for this. It's called a spoil. They could be a spoil to take away the election from somebody. So, and that's happened a few times in American history, or state elections too. Most famously in 2000, the Democrat Al Gore would have easily won, but a third party called the Green Party ran and took about 4.5% of the vote. And almost all those people would have voted for Gore, the Democrats. Gore still won the popular vote, but the Supreme Court gave it to Bush. I'll tell you that story when we get to 2000. It was at the beginning of a series of interesting events in American history. So, Texas was the issue. Despite the fact both of them tried to avoid it, that made it worse. You know, you try to straddle the fence, try to please both sides, you end up pleasing nobody. A lot of times, not always. Sometimes it's more important to just take a stand and stick to it. And even Polk was kind of swishy on. It's just focusing on Oregon. And so there's a river in western Texas and New Mexico called the Salt River. And they heard about the Salt River. People in Washington, D.C. have no idea. But the Salt River became that barrier that once you cross the Salt River, you can't go back. Once you make a political decision, you can't go back. So the Salt River. Okay, does anyone know a little bit of Roman history? Maybe a little bit? When Julius Caesar was marching his legion to Rome, basically to claiming that the current government was illegitimate. And the border of Rome was a river. You know the river? It's called the Rubicon. And if he crosses the Rubicon, that means it's still in Rome. Once you cross, you can't go back. So the Salt River became like our Rubicon. And Julius Caesar was triggered a civil war in the Roman Republic. What are we trying to do? You can remember it. Roman history is really interesting. Back to this. So here's the Salt River. And here's Polk trying to get across to get Texas, etc., but they can't get across because they're being held by Clay and Freeland, Hoyson, etc. And see what will happen. Here's another one with over the Salt River, and it's hot air balloons. Remember I told you about that? So here, This time, it's Polk and Dallas trying to get to the presidential chair, but they can't. Their balloons popped by Clay. And they're falling into the Salt River. And who's drowning in the Salt River? Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren. There's a bunch of these cartoons, but let's get to my favorite one. This one, where that's supposed to be Polk, and he's impaled into this beast they dubbed Texas. So he's stuck on Texas. And you can read it. Because if Polk, when he manifests destiny and Texas, it's going to cost him the presidency. I just love that one because it looked like literally they just stuck Polk and impaled him through the neck of the beast. Now, being someone who grew up in the United States, like most of you probably grew up after the Civil War. And if we look at this, what does that kind of look like? Does anyone else see Abraham Lincoln? Now, he was not Abraham Lincoln. No one knew who Abraham Lincoln was in 1844 outside of Springfield, Illinois. And Abraham Lincoln didn't have a beard then, but I see Abraham Lincoln. It's just interesting how that happened. So, the election of 1844, Polk would win a dramatic victory. A national victory, much like what happened to Harrison. And the Whigs immediately blamed the Whig Party, or the Liberty Party. Now, looking back at it, the Whigs probably, or the Liberty Party probably took votes from both parties pretty equally. But the Whigs blamed them. This would become a big issue, not for the Liberty Party and those foolish abolitionists. Even Free Soil Whigs and Free Soil Democrats hated abolitions. We'll get to that. There were very few abolitions, even up to the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, no abolitions. So, they won. But remember, the election is November. The president is not inaugurated until March of 1845. Who's still president? Who? No, Van Buren's not president. Remember, Van Buren lost in 1840. Who's president? Tyler. Tyler's president. And Texas is still up. A person who's still in office, but they're not going to be reelected, it's called a lame duck. I've mentioned this once before. Remember, Madison was a lame duck when he did the midnight justices that brought John Marshall and those Federalist judges. So, Tyler's the president, but Democrats control Congress. And they decide, let's pass a law to get Texas. Let's sign a treaty and get Texas into the Union. So when Polk is president, literally, he'll be inaugurated, go into the executive office, we call the Oval Office today, sign the bill, and Texas comes in. The great victory for Polk and the Democrats. The problem is a treaty requires 2/3 of the vote. They couldn't get 2/3. Never got that. That's why I put the line. They couldn't get 2/3. But do you remember who was the first president to use a treaty to get land? And it was very controversial. Remember? Hamilton was never president. Jefferson. So it's kind of like the ideological opponent. Thomas Jefferson. What was the name of this purchase again? Louisiana. It wasn't in the Constitution. So Congress said, why do we need a treaty? Let's just do an up and down vote. Yes or no, majority win. They had enough for the majority. And this is called a joint resolution. Oh, by the way, I get it. We might say Hamilton or Van Buren. We get a lot of names. I get it. I get it. So, and it passed. So at the end of February, they got this passed. And Texas is going to come into the Union. And the whole goal then, Polk does the oath, becomes president, walks in, it's all for Polk. But they got it done almost a week before the inauguration. And Tyler's still president. Bills, when they are passed by both houses of Congress, go to the president. They thought Tyler would have the good manners to wait until Polk. Not Tyler. Tyler, who is still furious and will always be furious. He decides to get the last laugh. And Tyler signed the bill. So Tyler would be the president who would sign the bill and get Texas in and get the last laugh. thus, as he saw, humiliating the Whigs who kicked him out and humiliating the Democrats and Polk. So when Polk became president, the process of bringing Texas into the Union had already happened. And he was furious. And so that's how Texas came in. Now add one more thing. I don't think I typed it in. The bill to bring Texas into the Union, it's a pretty complex bill, but Texas can divide, it was so big, they added a part to it. That Texas could divide into 5 states, up to 5 states if they want to. Everyone hear what I said? Up to 5 states. Now, first off, if you look over there, see the purple? That was Texas then. This is a really cool map of Texas right after the current border was established. Really darn good map of the 1850s, isn't it? What tribe is supposed to say? What's the tribe, fierce tribe I told you about? Not sure. Begins with a C. I know we've had a bunch of C tribes. Comanche. If someone said it, I just missed it. By the way, once I said that, everyone go, oh yeah. I get it. There's a lot of words. All right. One more thing I'll tell you. I just got to tell you. Right after the inauguration, Andrew Jackson died. Here's the last picture of Andrew Jackson taken in 1844. He was really old and he was ill. He couldn't eat because of his old wound back from 1806. But on your way out, let me show you. Anybody want to guess what his regrets were? You can see it as you walk out. You ready? They asked him, any regrets? Remind me on Monday to tell you about his funeral. Yeah. Oh no. He's getting more and more creepy. Oh my goodness. Okay, we might put these out. That's pretty good. And they're far too close.
Are we still good for me to do waves today?
Yeah, you come in. When do we do lunch?
Yeah.
It'll take about 10 minutes.
Okay.
The quiz that the one from Tuesday. Oh, the one. Got it. Perfect.
Step
Can I
one.
get a picture of
Yeah,
my
step
creation?
one.
Can I get a picture of my creation?
Yes. Those are good.
I love them so much. What is that?
I've already asked you yesterday. Why are we here? I just forgot it's class. You're in trouble. I think we got it correct.
A school called my house like 20 times.
Oh, no. Well, you shouldn't have made such a mess of it. No, I got busy and I just forgot. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I got your.
And I guess
You understand, don't you?
I guess Andrew Jackson did not like those people.
Huh?
Andrew Jackson did not like those
Nope. I think it's good here. Not blind enough. Oh, we might. Oh, okay. Let me shut this off.